Thelema, Coast to Coast, Show 42, June 27th, 2007. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Welcome to Thelema, Coast to Coast. My name is John Crow, and I'm the host of the show. There are numerous ways to contact the podcast. The first is via email, podcast@thelemacoasttocoast.com, through the website at www.thelemacoasttocoast.com, via voicemail at 206-600-5782, via mail at Thelema, Coast to Coast, care of John Crow, P.O. Box 7045, Marietta, Georgia, 30065, and that's in the U.S. And via MySpace at www.myspace.com/Thelema, Coast to Coast. There are some other ways, but those will do for now. Those who are on the Thelema, Coast to Coast website, that's going to be changing in about a week. My hosting with the current provider is going to be expiring, and I'm going to be moving it, so expect to see that change shortly. But I think it will also give people a chance to give immediate feedback about individual episodes versus going into the forum discussion and talking about episodes. I want to see how that will work out, so people will feel free to participate. The next thing is listener feedback. I'm getting into that immediately because I have a lot of feedback to go through. So the first is an email from Luke in Australia. He says, "Hello, John. First of all, commendations for the quality of your program. I stumbled across your podcast a few weeks ago at a time when I was doing some internet research on Thelema and reading the Book of the Law for the first time. I'm still in the process of catching up on the latest episode, but I found the podcast to be very informative, insightful, and educational, not to mention entertaining. As a newcomer to Thelema, and hence someone who is in the early stages of studying it and figuring out what it means to me, and if it's something I want to pursue further, I thought you might be interested in my viewpoint of Thelema and Thelemites, especially in reaction to such feedback as you received in podcast number 31 about Thelemites acting up at OTO activities and making a nuisance of themselves. Your response to the email really struck a tone in me, as it mirrored my own growing suspicions about the attitude of many self-confessed Thelemites that I hear about through your program. To me, until you discover your will, you cannot know what it is, and you cannot possibly be behaving in accordance with it, and you should be embarrassed to claim to your fellow Thelemites that you are living your true will when behaving stupidly. It seems there are many people who call themselves Thelemites who interpret Thelema as, quote, indulge every whim, close quote, or, quote, act like an idiot, close quote, instead of do what thou wilt. Yourself and Keith 418 have talked about this many times. What I find astonishing is that even I, as a complete newcomer to Thelema, can see that these people are misguided and don't understand Thelema at all, and don't seem to be interested in studying it as a philosophy, and they are OTO members. Surely they should be much more knowledgeable on the subject than I, or have I really missed the point of Thelema? I hope this doesn't offend the serious Thelemites out there like yourself and Keith 418, but they are making the OTO look bad, and they should leave the organization and form their own, quote, social misfits who want to be free of responsibility, close quote, order, instead of muddying the waters of the OTO. Until I began listening to your show, I assumed the OTO and the AA were very serious and dignified groups of people working as hard at the esoteric path as Crowley did himself. I know there are serious students out there, both within the OTO and without, and they may indeed vastly outnumber the idiots. But like I said, these individuals are making the order look bad. Thanks for reading this, and keep up the great work. Excuse the apparent ignorance of leaving out the 93 greeting, but I figured I'd be a real sheep to suddenly adopt it when I can't even call myself a Thelemite yet. Luke. Well, Luke, thank you very much. And Luke did send a secondary email where he says, let's see, this is my second email to you, so I'll skip the superlatives about your show. They still stand. I'll try to be more specific, though. My favorite segments are the Keith 418 interviews. If only every Thelemite and every OTO member were serious about Thelema, Crowley, and the OTO in the same way that you guys are, it sounds very disappointing. Please continue the discussions, and I'm sorry to hear via another podcast that you got kicked out of the OTOs for your outspokenness. I wish I could give some constructive criticism, but I really do like all your interviews. The only issue I have with the show is the music. I suppose, with the exception of Lon Milo's songs you've played, it's rarely to my taste, but no music will ever please anyone. At least I can always skip to the next episode. Luke. Well, thanks, Luke. Thanks for the 2 emails. Well, what can I say? Yeah, there are a lot of irresponsible and foolish people in the order and outside, and who make Thelema look bad. But that's not that uncommon. I mean, how many Christians do you know who make Christianity look bad? So we do what we can, and I would encourage you, if you're interested in Thelema, to really engage in the works of Aleister Crowley and some of his contemporary writers or his students, and really get a good idea of what Thelema is about from them. A lot of the modern authors really don't know what the hell they're talking about and should be just ignored. So anyway, let's go on to the next one. This one is from Adrian. I think he's written before. He says, 93, John. I've literally just finished listening to Thelema Coast to Coast 41 and would just like to say thank you so much for a wonderfully well-presented and informative show. To me, it seems to represent a definitive stage of the podcast's evolution, ushering in a new level of maturation, which is very much to your credit. Despite my previous mail, I have to say that your latest discussion with Keith 418 was reasoned, calm, and raised some very important issues which precious few people are either able or willing to address. Listening to you talking reminded me so much of the conversations I myself had with occultist friends whose opinions I respect. I'm not saying I personally agree with all the issues raised, but I don't have to. That's the point. Once again, John, thanks for all the work you've put into the podcast over the last 2 years. As always, I look forward to seeing what you do next as life starts a new phase for you. I wish you all the best. Hopefully we can meet in person at some point, Adrian. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's good that you don't agree all the time. We're not looking for agreement. We're looking for people to engage and think. So if you don't agree, that's fine. The next email is from Giles. He says, Hi, John. I'm listening to your interview with Frater WIT. And for those who don't know what that is an interview I had on the last podcast talking about his book, Enochian Initiation. Frater WIT mentions Regardie's Ceremonial Magic being out of print. It has been reprinted a year or two, as has his Foundations of Practical Magic by Aeon Books. Ceremonial Magic is still available on Amazon.co.uk. They both should be obtainable via the Aeon Books website, www.aeonbooks.co.uk. That it has been republished might not be widely known, so this may help change this. Regards, Giles. Well, thank you for the announcement, and anybody who's interested in getting those 2 works from Regardie can go directly to aeonbooks.co.uk. And yes, you can get them from Amazon, and that may be convenient. However, I encourage everybody when they can to go to the publisher's website and order it direct. The publishers end up getting the same amount of money. This is assuming there's not some enormous discount. It's hard being in publishing, and the publishers don't make a lot of money. And sure, you may not save that 5 or 10%, which will cost you another few bucks, but for them, that kind of money starts to add up after a while. So, I really encourage people to go to the publisher website and purchase directly from the publisher if they can, especially on very small presses. Every little bit helps them. All right. The next email is from Willis. He writes, 93 John, long-time listener, first-time responder. Haven't gotten many of that kind of opening. So first would like to congratulate you on your episode 39. It was some of your best work. I especially enjoyed the discussion on Freud's totem and taboos. I had read the material before, but had always focused on the killing and consuming the primal father effects upon the ideas of Christianity. Keith's 418's focus on the primal father himself was something I had missed and allowed me to go back and reread the material with a different perspective. Next, as a longtime member of the Golden Dawn and a new Thelemite, I am completely perplexed by the lack of publishing Crowley books by the OTO, as you touched on in episode number 40. You do not see this in the Golden Dawn community. Rigardi's books are constantly getting reprinted, often with new material. Pat Zalewski's, where raw material is easy to acquire. Even the more obscure items, like the Golden Dawn Journal series, is coming back into print after a short drought. Why not Crowley? In the podcast, you touched on a number of possible reasons, including non-interest of buyers, lack of money, a bad relationship with the publishers, among others. But none of this touches the heart of the matter. The books are not coming out because it is not a priority to the OTO. If it was a priority, then it would be accomplished regardless of the obstacles. Why it is not a priority is one discussion. What is their priority instead is what interests me. The OTO has a priority either consciously or not. What is it? The recent crackdown on blog posting, etc., is not their priority, but a symptom of their true aims, whatever those might be. Perhaps you and Keith could discuss this in a future podcast. Regardless, keep up the good work, and I look forward to listening to more shows. Yours in the great work, Willis. Well, Willis, I think one of the main priorities of the OTO is to make a fun social environment. I see a lot of the activity with the OTO members and bodies less about magic, less about Thelema, less about engaging in the material, and more about having social engagements, having parties, throwing festivals. The biggest event in the OTO is not a large magical ritual, is not, anything related to Crowley, really. The biggest thing is their Noticon, which happens every 2 years, an OTO convention, in which the OTO members get together and basically spend a whole weekend partying. You know, there is a pretext of having conference lectures about things, but I think most people will admit that the lectures are tertiary, to say the least. So it really is about a social who's who and being seen and hooking up and doing drugs and partying. And, a lot of the local bodies are the same way, too. And it's really disappointing that so much of the OTO members and organization as a whole is moving away from the material. And that's why we see the priority is not on republishing Crowley. If you're interested in having a good time and hanging out with your friends, reading a book of Crowley's journals or reading a book of Crowley letters like Magic Without Tears is just not a priority. I mean, that's something you do by yourself. It's not something that you can go and have a good time or get fucked up to do. So it ends up, being something that gets put on the shelf and eventually forgotten. So it seems to me, after being in the OTO since 1992, that it's just really not a priority. They're more interested in having social engagement, and that's a lot of why you see the OTO attracting the lowest common denominator of the society, and all of those who are responsible or interested in the material end up leaving the order at one time or another because it really can't engage them, and they get tired of wasting their time with people who can't even show up at a meeting not fucked up on drugs. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of it, Willis. Thanks for emailing. All right, the next email is from Mark. He writes, hello, Mr. Crow. Prompted by your Thelemic email, I contacted Behutic and wound up writing an article for them, which should be in the next issue. Thanks for letting me know about the easing. mark. Well, good. I'm glad. Bahutit is